Hello and welcome everybody. This is our, I think, 20th Platform Academy. Today I'm being joined by Jason Lefever and I have my colleagues Daniel and Mark in the background as usual. This session will be about getting started with Process Automation Designer. Thank you everybody so much for joining. We have just crossed our 1-year mark last week. So thank you for staying with us for a whole year. I hope the upcoming sessions will be interesting to you too. As always, this webinar is being recorded and will be added to YouTube, hopefully tomorrow. And with that, I will get into things. So my name is Lisa. I'm an outbound product manager for ServiceNow, and I cover workflow automation product. I've been working with the Now platform for about 6 years, and I've been with ServiceNow for 3.5 of those. I'm being joined by, as I said, by Jason Lefever, who's the inbound, what is it? He's the product owner for Process Automation Designer. Please give a little introduction to yourself.
Hi, everyone. Greetings from wherever you're joining us around the world. As Lisa said, I'm Jason Lefever. I am extremely passionate about low-code development, and so my area of expertise is Process Automation Designer, our low-code business process management, digital process automation solution. We'll be diving into some details here and hopefully getting you excited about the possibilities for driving process automation within your organizations.
Sounds good. So let's dive into things. I don't think we're going to be covering a lot of forward-looking statements this time. We're very close to the EA period. So actually our next session, which will be in exactly 4 weeks on August 4th, will cover the second side of processes. So today we will be focusing on Process Automation Designer. In 4 weeks, we will be covering Playbook experience, so make sure to rejoin us at that date to learn more about the user experience side of processes in the Now platform. And I really want to encourage you to check out both and learn about both and take the training that is out there as well. As I said, we won't be going into too much forward-looking details today, so there's no safe harbor slide, but next time is EA period for the Tokyo release. And that means we can start talking about the enhancements to Process Automation Designer and Playbook experience with the Tokyo release. So be sure to check that out. And just to give you a small info on the agenda. So mostly we're speaking about Process Automation Designer. We'll touch a little bit on Playbook experience. And then as time permits, Jason will give us a small tour through a live demo of the product, and then we'll wrap it up at the end. All right, some abbreviations that you will find us using are PAD for Process Automation Designer, PD sometimes for the process definition, and then also PE for Playbook experience, as well as FD or Flow Designer, like that. And then we always love to use our quotes. We used to always use quotes by Fred Luddy, who wants to work through the enterprise, but we have a new CEO and he likes to emphasize that the Now platform helps to work to flow naturally. So whenever work flows, then great experiences follow. And that's really what we want to achieve with Process Automation Designer and Playbook experience as well. So why did we start to create this product when there's already Flow Designer and business rules and all kinds of options to create processes and to have your, say, task life cycles be routed and stuff like that? So there are a lot of problems to the backends when it comes to complex processes. Before the introduction of PAD, you would always need ServiceNow Pro developers to connect multiple services and departments with processes. In the legacy workflow world, with business rules and script includes, it's really hard to identify what drives a given process at which stage. So artifacts are disconnected as well. Second, you cannot easily modify such a process, as changes are being made for each individual use case. Most importantly, it's really hard to gain insight into the full picture of a process, and there's no single process view that you can look at to understand the nested relationships between the teams and the tasks involved in a service. A small dive into the playbook experience side. So what are the problems that agents will face when dealing with complex processes? So first of all, they cannot see all of the components and steps that make up the process. They will need to drill in and out of related tasks and navigate to other parts of the platform. It takes quite a bit of training effort to make the agent understand which step comes next in the process. They must analyze the forms and notes to find the right path and figure out the next step. And when changes are being made to a process, additional training and documentation is needed to make sure that the agents know to follow with the process. And then lastly, there's no single view to make out where in the process the agent is and which steps are required to proceed. I don't know how often I had people call me when we first started using ServiceNow when I was a customer. And they would be like, I don't know, I need this change to proceed, but I don't know which button I have to press, or what is the state? What does it need? What do I have to do to get to the end and solve this case, or close out this incident, or change, or whatever process people were working on? So what we wanted to do is introduce a way to make that visible to all of your agents. So this is the need for a process automation designer. We have many applications and teams in ServiceNow today that may participate in business processes. Simple processes are still easy enough to handle in a flow, like straightforward requests that only require an approval and a task or two. It gets much more complicated once different departments are involved, for example, when requesting a new desk. These kinds of processes hand over info and tasks from one team to another and involve different departments too. It gets even trickier when looking at complex connected services that span multiple departments and teams to fulfill. A prime example is any onboarding process, be that employees, customers, or vendors. Procure-to-pay processes spanning from expense pre-approval over fulfillment and hand over to your account software for payment, and the other end is a good example. Process Automation Designer will then provide you with a clean low-code interface to plan and create enterprise service processes, to make the process transparent to the end user and reuse existing business logic for your process activities. To do that, our product vision for Process Automation Designer is to provide business owners, business process owners, a builder to digitize, visualize, and manage end-to-end workflows across business services. Our product vision for Playbook experience is to provide a way to visualize and interact with business process workflows in real time via a simple task-oriented view. And we also want to ensure a consistent response to commonly encountered situations. We're really flying through this thing, but I've done this before, and you will notice there's actually training, and there's 2 CreatorCon labs that I did during Knowledge. If you want to learn hands-on, that's where you need to go. So I will put, I have those links in the presentation notes, and I will also put them in the YouTube description and in the community post. So you can go ahead to Now Learning and do the training on demand and learn these things by yourself in a real instance and with a prepared use case. So what are some of the biggest product benefits for PAD and Playbooks? We offer a no-code process authoring experience to model an enterprise workflow, and it lets you coordinate manual, automated, and integration process activities. These steps and lanes and phases can run in parallel or sequential, and you can also make use of data flow. So like you are used from Flow Designer, you can hand over data from one step and one phase to another. So any subsequent steps have access to the outputs of the previous activities. And speaking of the low-code Flow Designer is highly integrated into this product. It's basically the fiber that keeps everything together. So each of the activities will run based on a flow, subflow, or flow action. And that means you can easily extend this with your own logic and use your existing subflows for process automation design. And then on the front end side, everything can be integrated into a configurable workspace. So the newer Next Experience workspaces can easily show your playbooks in a playbook component, and therefore through that offer progressive guidance to your agents. You can also extend this with other Now platform capabilities. So for example, you can surface SLA timers on the individual activities in the playbook so that they know how long they still have to complete a certain step. So I've already mentioned Process Automation Designer and Playbook Experience. Those are basically two sides of the same coin. Process Automation Designer is the design space, the backend, the authoring tool, how to create your cross-enterprise workflows to a single and unified process. Playbook Experience is a UI platform for viewing and interacting with business process workflows in real time. Both products can function independently of each other, but provide the most value when used together. And to give you a small insight, we'll see more when we look at this live in an instance later, but the general outline of a process is you will have the process definition, that's the top level record. You will have a trigger for your trigger table and define when this process runs. And this at this spot, make sure that you don't have duplicate triggers in flows and processes. Unless that's on purpose. So be mindful on when different processes and flows will trigger off the same records or the same table to not duplicate flow logic or logic. And then the top level record as the trigger record, the process will contain one or multiple lanes. Each of the lanes can contain one or more process activities. On each of those can run in parallel. One after the other, only when the previous one has completed immediately. So a lane set to immediately will run whenever the playbook is, the process is triggered. An activity in each lane will set to immediately will run as soon as the lane starts. You can also add conditions to both of those. So you can make one activity conditional. It only starts if the output of a previous one is a certain value. You can add timers to this, so you can have some delay and start a whole lane or individual activities with a delay if you want to. Playbook experience, the playbook experience component within the workspace is the parent record. So you will see the playbook attached to a given record. Each record will show different stages. You can have multiple playbooks, running playbooks per record. So you can actually have multiple instances of the same process running, or you can also have different processes trigger off the same record. Each of the stages will then show the different activities, and those represent the activities that you've seen in the designer. Additionally, you can also add declarative actions at playbook stage or activity level. Those are more or less buttons that you can configure to trigger any other updates or other actions that you want to start from there. I'll briefly touch on different user personas that are involved in this. So we have, there's a question. So Brian asks us, are declarative actions basically like UI actions? In high-level principle, yes. I think you can also connect an existing UI action to a declarative action, but declarative actions can do more things. So they can, for example, also interact with other components on your configurable workspace. So using Next Experience and UI Builder, you can open modals, for example, or do other fun stuff in your UI Builder page. So user personas, we generally think of 4 personas who can be involved in processes, and those can absolutely overlap. So for example, the citizen developer or the process owner can be the same person. We can also have the citizen developer be an IT developer or a ServiceNow developer. So don't think of these personas as rigid structures, just those are the general roles involved in processes. Developers will use Flow Designer to create reusable activities to serve as building blocks within a process. So they will be focused on the different activities and the actions that are happening. The process owner will use Process Automation Designer to create processes and to organize multiple activities into a cross-enterprise workflow. They're interested in the outcomes. Then we'll have the workspace admins or page authors. They will use UI Builder to work on workspaces and custom pages. but also create custom activity UIs for your activities, which is a new feature in San Diego. They can embed the playbook experience into their workspaces. So they're focused on the experience level. And then lastly, the person who will at the end use the process. So the agents who will work it, they will be focused to working it in a workspace. They will interact with activities on the playbook and complete the individual tasks within the process to bring the process to a close. Small history of Process Automation Designer. We have introduced Process Automation Designer already 4 releases ago. So it's been a full 2 years, which is insane thinking of it. I've been involved in creating content for process automation since the first release. So I've been creating CreatorCon labs for Process Automation Designer since the Paris release. And seeing the product grow and become more and more usable and user-friendly is really a great journey to be a witness of. And I really hope you give it a chance and start using it for your processes. At first, Process Automation Designer was mostly a very simple UI. You could create your first own custom activities and some conditional activities. In Quebec, we added some form and UI improvements and adding actions at stage and playbook level. In the Rome release, we enhanced the UI again so that you didn't always have to open the Jelly interface, but have the option to configure your activities in the design space, actually. And then San Diego brought a bunch of cool additions, that is conditional lanes, starting with delay, and also integrating Process Automation Designer into AES. And with that, one very important security feature, we added delegated development options. So you can decide to give a process owner permission to create processes and edit a process within their own app scope. So this supports delegated development for a specific application scope. And I think that's a very important addition if you want to involve citizen developers. So before we head into things, I have 2 more slides, I think. One is some additional info, and the second will be outlining some differentiation. When would you use Flow Designer over Process Automation Designer? And the first and most important thing is Process Automation Designer does not replace Flow Designer. It leverages it. So each process activity has the action plan that runs in Flow Designer. So the added benefit is that you also get all of the debugging capabilities in Flow Designer. So for each of the activities, you will find there's, if you have reporting enabled, you'll have the execution plan, you'll have access to the same logs, logging options. You can test the individual actions before you use them. It can also automate different platform capabilities. So anything, we deliver a bunch of out-of-the-box activities like record creation, updates, notifications, and things like that. Records created through the process execution can still be interacted with as if they were created by any other method. And that also means you can go ahead and update your tasks and your records in the regular form interface if you want to, and if it fulfills the conditions for the process to proceed, it will proceed regardless of where you updated the record. So you're not forced to use the playbook, you can. And then we have a couple of teams who have already started building out of the box content that is available through the ServiceNow store. And we'll have more teams adding to that. I think there's playbooks for customer service. There's playbooks for security incidents, I think. they're working on other ITSM or technology workflows as well. I won't say too much for the licensing. If you want to use PAD with custom apps, then you will need to have an App Engine entitlement, and the others have different entitlements. There's a whole page on docs that will tell you what is included in it. So the last one, this is probably these are very frequent questions that I get asked is, well, but why should we use Process Automation Designer? And I can still use my flows and business rules and everything. So I wanted to give you some guidance around when to use PAD over Flow Designer. Flow Designer is the tool of choice to automate self-contained units of logic, but always keep reusability in mind. And as such, I will recommend to reduce scripting where possible. So if you find using similar inline scripts regularly, consider you creating a spoke with reusable actions. Flow actions should only ever do one thing at a time. So for example, calculating a value, getting data from a remote system or something like that. Subflows will then be groupings of actions for reusability. So for example, a specific approval with an output, making a decision, and some following actions with the decision result, etc. And flows will then add the trigger layer. You should use PAD when you come to complex processes. So anything that will span multiple departments or phases, or even involve multiple persona. Being able to surface the process to the agents with a playbook can be a major factor, since it eases the need for training and enablement to allow the agents to fully work the process end to end. Optional activities and flow data allow for ad hoc input and activities at process runtime. So for example, additional subtasks, etc. And then lastly, one new feature also in San Diego is order guide sequencing. This is a big improvement introduced. So this allows you to finally rearrange and arrange and order and sequence your order guides. So you can decide in which phases they are being fulfilled. As a recap, before we head out into our demo, let's recap on what we learned so far. So Process Automation Designer reduces or even eliminates the need for pro developers when connecting multiple processes and services across your organization. It is simple to use, simple to edit, and grants visibility into how the services are connected like you never could before. And that's about all I have for my presentation. I hope this gave you a good insight and first introduction into Process Automation Designer and a little bit about Playbook experience.
So I'm going to focus most of the demo presentation on Process Automation Designer today, but I will tease Playbook just a little bit so that you can see the other side of a process when an agent or fulfiller is interacting, perhaps resolving an incident. So we'll do a little bit of teaser to get everyone excited for our August session.
Oh, yes.
I'm particularly excited about that as well, because we'll get to talk about some of the new features that are coming with Tokyo. Lisa, you mentioned how teams are starting to work on more out-of-the-box content to further enable our low-code and citizen developers. That's one of the things that will be coming with our August store release in the Tokyo timeframe. So more to come on that.
Can you bump up your font just a tiny bit to make sure we can see it? Maybe one more. Thank you.
Sure thing. Okay, so some basic navigation before we jump into Process Automation Designer. It's available via the platform navigation. So search for Process Automation, and you'll see here that you've got Process Automation Designer. So I've gone ahead and pre-opened a couple of windows so that I can show you different things when configuring a process. This is essentially the landing page where an admin will navigate to see all of the existing process definitions. Again, with delegated development, a process owner can build and manage processes within a defined application scope. This is also where they'd come to work to either modify an existing process or to create a new process. So what I wanted to do to get started was show the way that a new process definition is created. It's very simple to get started, and then I'll jump into an existing process where we can show kind of the available options, how a user would configure things, etc. So I'll create a new process. It's going to collect a couple of basic things here. So name my new process. Let's say we're going to build a contract management application. Let's just call this the contract management process. description, and then you pick your scope application. So that's just defaulted there. The next thing you do is define your trigger type. So you can choose your own conditions, record create, record update, record create or update, or you could choose an existing trigger. So if Lisa had mentioned, beware of having multiple triggers used across different flows and different processes, can be done with intention, but certainly be aware. So I'm going to say record create, and then we can set trigger conditions. So we first choose the table. So in this case, I would need to create a custom application for contracts. But let's say we search for case. So, you know, if I wanted to create something with case, or if I wanted to do it off of incident, this will essentially say anytime an incident is created, this process will run. And we can also add conditions. So if I want to have multiple potential processes that run when an incident is created, I can say I want to look for specific criteria to be met. So in the case of, let's say a contract, I want to run this process if the contract type is cloud subscription. We could say, we could add that condition to run, and then when the parent record is created and the contract type is cloud subscription, it would run this particular process. If it's a professional services contract, it would run a different process, let's say. So
that's very similar to Flow Designer also, right? So we can also decide to have this run off of extended tables or not, and some other things, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Perfect.
Absolutely. So then that's it. And my process definition will be generated, and then I'll be taken into my designer canvas. Now at this point, I'm going to jump into an existing process. This particular one is incident response. So this is what a example process looks like in the canvas. I'm going to open up the process properties just to talk through this a little bit. This is the information that was provided when we created the process, the steps I just walked through. And then you can see here that my triggered type is anytime a record is created off of the incident table. And in this example, we have a condition to run that says anytime the short description starts with the word playbook and a colon. So it's going to look for that in the short description, and then it will run this process. So what we've done is we've authored a couple of different lanes or stages. The way to add a lane to your process is to click this button up here to add a lane. And then you have this lane properties side configuration panel. So you provide basic information, the label for it, the description, again, a run condition. So if we want to conditionally run this lane based on certain properties evaluating, you can add those as well. And finally, when to start, whether it's after the previous lane completes, when the previous lane starts, or immediately when the process begins to run, depending upon your use case. Finally, you can add start with delay. This allows you to bake an intentional delay into your lane or activity running with a couple of different options, whether it's I'm going to specify a specific duration to delay the start of my lane or activity, relative duration, or percentage duration. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this lane since I won't be using it in my process. And then we'll talk about activities. So lanes or stages of the process can be thought of as similar types of work. So you can see here, we've got a couple of steps in our incident response process that deal with identification. So let's collect information about who our customer is. Let's get some information about this particular incident. Let's identify what's wrong and why the customer has reached out to us today for some help. Another potential way to segregate activities within lanes is if work needs to transition to a different team as you progress through your process, but totally up to you as far as how you group your process activities together. So let's talk about activities. If I want to add a process activity or a process step to this designer, I click add a process activity. And then I'm given this modal where you can see we have a number of out-of-the-box activities. So Lisa had mentioned this. If we need to create a child task that's related to our incident, if we need to present some instructions to our agents as they're working on a case, or even if we want to just put a placeholder. So the beautiful thing about Process Automation Designer is it enables collaboration between development teams and low code, no code users. So if we have a process owner, a process analyst, it could be someone embedded within a business function that is going to help to map out a process. They can come in and essentially add placeholders to each of the defined lanes in the process. And these placeholders don't have any automation behind them. So if you're truly not going to touch any type of automation as you define your process, you can use placeholders, and then your development team can come back in and determine the appropriate pre-wired activity definition that will achieve the outcome desired in each process step. Some of the others include user forms. So if we want to present certain fields to a user so that they can enter information about our incident or our case at a particular point in the process, we can configure which fields are displayed and allow the user to update information and progress the process. And as Lisa mentioned, if we update information in the playbook card, it will simultaneously update those properties in the incident itself, and vice versa. You can see that there are a handful of other out-of-the-box activities available, such as a checklist, send an email, show a knowledge article, et cetera, et cetera. And again, when we talk in August, we'll show some of the new out-of-the-box activities that we've been working on to further enable citizen developers to quickly spin up processes.
I think one cool thing about the checklist task is you don't actually need to have a task the checklist runs on. So if you don't give it a specific task, for example, the trigger incident, it'll just spin up a placeholder task somewhere else and use the checklist on that. And you can also make use of existing checklist templates. So you can define which template to load. So which checklist people need to fill out for that specific activity to be completed. And it'll auto-complete once all of the checkboxes are checked or the skip button is hit.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we have an example of that in our playbook. So again, plug for coming back in August. We'll run this exact scenario in the playbook side of things. So a couple of other thoughts about kind of the collaboration between your process author, your process owner, and your development teams. Lisa had mentioned to think of flow designer and subflows as self-contained outcomes, and also to think of reusability. So the same concept is applicable in defining activity definitions. So an activity definition is essentially a wrapper for a flow or subflow or flow action, and the experience properties that are passed to your playbook that presents information to your agents and fulfillers. So think about how specific process activities within your organizations could be pre-configured so that your process owners can simply drop them into any process and reuse them wherever applicable. So think of an approval step. So if I need to configure a specific step in my process where I seek a manager approval, you can build a manager approval activity definition that's powered by a subflow. And then wherever an approval is required, your citizen developer can drop that into the process designer and do some basic configuration, like identify which manager should be sent the approval request.
Yeah, one cool thing about this, and I will recommend to use subflows or flow actions over flows because they have inputs and outputs. So the inputs and outputs of your subflow or flow action are at the same time the inputs and outputs of your activity. So you don't have to configure those separately. And we had a question in the Q&A panel just earlier that will be covered by this. So the question was, Flow Designer has access to service catalog variables. Can PAD have access to those also? So if you create a small subflow that will look up a request items catalog variables and then maps those to the subflow outputs, you can make those variables available to subsequent activities or subsequent lanes.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about interacting with activities on this designer. This is a drag and drop experience. So as I'm a process owner and designing my incident response process, I can sequence the sequence of steps. So these are ordered, and I can configure these activities so that they run sequentially in the identification lane of this process. This is exactly how this has been configured. So the first step will be confirm contact details and then gather more information. Only runs after the previous activity has completed. Same thing with review existing incidents for the customer. So very sequential, but you can also configure these to run in parallel. So if there are multiple activities that need to be available to your agents as they're working on a playbook, you can configure them to run in parallel. So let me talk about the configuration side panel for an activity. So some similar information here is what you saw with lanes: a label, a description, a reference to the out-of-the-box activity definition that has been used. So this particular activity is using the activity user form activity definition, essentially prompting the agent to collect some information. It's configured to run immediately and is off of the incident table. So you can see here that we've got a pre-built form template that we're using to present information here. It's collecting contact information from our user. Let me show an example of how we may be able to reference data from earlier in the process. So when I collect information about my incident, so something that's persisted on the incident table, I'm able to dot walk to that information. So, the incident itself, or any information that I've collected earlier in the process. This little icon here allows you to do what's called dot walking. So if I need to leverage information that was collected in any of the previous steps of the process, I can navigate into any of those data elements and then reference them later in my process. Another option, which is a little more advanced, is leveraging flow data records. So if I'm collecting arbitrary inputs as part of running my playbook, meaning I'm collecting information that is not going to be persisted to my incident table, it's really specific to this particular process execution, I can define a data definition and then leverage that data definition to collect these inputs and then use them elsewhere in my process. So if something like alternate email address or alternate phone number is not something that I'm persisting against the incident table.
Delivery address.
Delivery address, exactly. Yes,
Like
great idea. I can collect that as part of my custom data definition in an earlier stage of the process. And then later on, let's say I have to ship something using that delivery address, I can dot walk and reference that flow data record to generate my shipping label based on the address that was collected. Okay, so what I'll do next is I'll give you just a sneak peek at a playbook in Agent Workspace. So this incident response demo has interactive activities. We don't really have any non-interactive activities, such as, something that does some back-end processing and progresses the process. All of these will present a screen to my agent as he or she is working on an incident. So I've pre-initiated an incident in Workspace, and you can see here that I have a progress indicator in my left navigational panel. This will outline the stages or lanes of my process, and then it will summarize the activities within each of one of those lanes. So you can see here that we've got 3. It will essentially give me a sense of how much work has been done on this incident so far, where in the incident resolution process are we. I can go back and look at information. Let's say I received this assignment midway through the process and I need to get my bearings. I can go back and look through what has been completed and really understand what's going on with the incident. And then each of these activity cards is powered by these activity definitions within my process. So your agent will follow a sequence. And so one of the things that I talk with customers frequently about is, some of the challenges that they face are bringing their help desk operations to the next level. Some customers will describe scenarios where agents are having to review knowledge articles that will describe the resolution process. Here with Playbooks and Process Automation Designer, we are actually sequencing the steps that should be taken to resolve an incident rather than forcing the agent to have a knowledge article open that describes that incident resolution process. So really makes the ramp time to understand how to resolve an incident very fast and intuitive, and also drives consistency in how agents respond to incidents.
I think we also have some options and integrations that I believe the CSM team is using guided decisions. So you can define guided decision trees that the agent would walk through in one of those activities, and then they will be taken to a specific KB, for example, as a resolution to their specific case. So interacting with other products and other capabilities from our platform will help your agents to resolve these things a lot faster.
Yeah.
We have one more question. Does PAD work with mobile?
So that is actually a use case that we're actively exploring today. So we have a couple of organizations within ServiceNow that are primarily mobile. And so that is definitely on the near-term roadmap to enable configuration and deployment of playbooks and process within a mobile experience.
So that would be the playbook side of things. The design space for creating the processes would still be in desktop and in Process Automation Designer, but then the actual playbooks that run like this one in the workspace would be available on mobile in the future.
Absolutely. Yep, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Couple of other comments. So Lisa, you had mentioned a little bit about licensing. I can expand a little bit on that, and we'll provide the documentation. So everyone can install Process Automation Designer with your Now platform entitlement. The place where licensing comes into play is which tables you can use to trigger your processes. So an example would be if I have ITSM licensing, I would be given access to create processes, trigger processes off of the incident and the incident task tables, for example. CSM has other tables that they grant access to, and then App Engine licensing gives you access to all of the ServiceNow standard tables. In addition to all of that I just said, if you're building a custom table or extending an existing ServiceNow table, you can also trigger processes off of any custom table and extended table. Okay, Lisa, do you think you recommend any other areas we should dive into?
If you have an order guide sequence somewhere, I'll show that.
Yeah, I'll turn it right over to you so you can do that.
All right. Okay, let me answer the last question here. So the question, one question about Now Learning or tutorials. Yes, there is Now Learning, and there are 2 creator concessions. I will be sharing those through in the community post, and the presentation has a lot of resources and training in the appendix. So you can follow there. Let me share this screen now. Be hopefully the right one. All right, so what I have here is another instance, and I have an order guide already created. I found that it's rather easy to create one. I've had some questions around it already. One question that we had in chat was that whether, let me check. All right. If the order guide is triggered from Service Portal and uses workflows, do the workflows need to be converted to flows before order guide sequencing can be used? And the answer is no. So you can use any catalog item. What the catalog items themselves use to fulfill your order, the different fulfillment that is in there doesn't matter for the order guide sequencing. So in your, once you have activated the order guide sequencing plugin, you will see a new field on your order guide interface. And as long as there's no record connected, you will have a new button called Generate Sequence. If you hit that, you will see a pop-up come up, and it will ask you to give it a new name. Since I already created one, I will show that in a second. But the order guide has a number of catalog items attached to them. And not all of them have flows. I think some of them even have workflows still connected to it. So in the process engine here, you'll see that this one will run a workflow and not a flow. It doesn't matter for the order guide sequence though. So you don't have to migrate everything right now. Once you have your sequence created and it's connected, let me just save this real quick. It will take you to Process Automation Designer automatically, and all of the items will be listed immediately in one lane. I have already modified this one sequencing process, so you can get to it with this icon, similar to how you could get to the workflows or flows connected to your catalog item. And this will load up a Process Automation Designer. And I have already added a couple of lanes and activities and moved the activities around. So these are basically all of the items that are included in your order guide. And then you can go ahead and just drag and drop and move them around, maybe have conditional lanes, add conditions. This one will only run under certain conditions or not. And this will also show in the Service Portal. So once you have requested this, and you can see the open requests for this, I submitted this order guide just today earlier. Once the approval has been given, you will see that the lanes that are later in the process have not yet started. So the Corp VPN and the desk setup, those are later in my process. So the desk setup here and the Corp VPN, this one runs after. So for example, I will wait for an email account or an AD account before I set up VPN access, because it doesn't make any sense otherwise. And for the facilities, this lane just runs after previous. So it won't start until the previous lane has completed. And the customer who submits this, this order guide will see this reflected in the stages of their request. That was the thing about the order guides. I hope this answered your questions. Let me see, there's another one. Greta says thanks. So it seems like it answered the question. That's great. We do have one more small exercise for you. We would like you to vote on the topics or the capabilities that you would love to see in Process Automation Designer. I think Jason can help you figure out how to comment on this in Zoom.
Yes, that's right. So at the top of your webinar window in Zoom, where you see the green bar that says you're viewing Lisa's screen, there's a tab called View Options. And if you expand that and navigate almost to the bottom, there's an option to annotate. What we ask is that you drop an annotation on any of the squares where you think, oh, this is an intriguing topic. It would certainly help me in my journey to automate processes. Feel free to drop an icon there, and then we'll certainly use that feedback as we weigh our product priorities in the future.
Yes. So I'll give you an example. It should be somewhere so you can have a stamp or something, and then you can throw stars over there on the topic. Just, oh yes, decision. That's Decision Builder, right?
That's right. That's right.
Decision Builder is awesome. There, you can get to decisions in your flows that run the activities, but we're looking at bringing that to the forefront of the actual design space in process automation design. So right now you can do it also in Flow Designer, but it's just an intermediate step in between. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you all very much for joining us. We have about a couple of minutes left. Let me just show you this. So I will share the slide deck on the community post. Make sure to check that. All of the docs are in here, as well as a white paper that we have on Now Create on Process Automation Designer and Playbooks, with a lot of detailed info on how the different artifacts and different things work together. There are also a bunch of videos out there already, a Creator Toolbox session on the order guide sequencing and TechNow episodes. They are a little older, but most of the high-level stuff is still relevant. We also have the knowledge training and I've also added some really good Flow Designer and Decision Builder labs there. So make sure to check those out. They're really, really helpful, useful, and awesome. So for the upcoming sessions, as I said, in 4 weeks, we're going to be speaking about Playbook experience, and we will have more detailed info on the August store release, which coincides with the Tokyo Early Access. Please join us for that one. We're very much looking forward to seeing you there. I have a small summer break before that, so there's no session in 2 weeks. And then after the Playbook experience session, we will dive into everything Goodness Now platform in the Tokyo release. So the next session after that will cover all kinds of updates and new topics and everything that's new in the Tokyo release. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you so much, Jason, for showing us PAD, and looking forward to have you on this academy in 4 weeks as well. I hope everybody has a lovely summer. And I will see you again. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.